Hi, I'm Maximilian Alvarez. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Real News Network and host of the podcast Working People. And this is the Art of Class War on Breaking Points. Well, 2023 was a very long and intense year of reporting here on the Art of Class War. Over the past year, we have spoken with striking workers in France and the UK. We've spoken with trade unionists in Australia who are taking direct action to show solidarity with Palestine and Palestinians. We have spoken with U.S. rail workers in the immediate aftermath of the catastrophic Norfolk Southern train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. We've also spoken with striking UAW auto workers, hotel workers in Las Vegas. We've covered the ghoulish effort by industry groups and right-wingers to roll back child labor laws in states around the country, and a lot more. In our last Art of Class War segment for 2023, which we actually recorded right before Christmas, we're taking a look at more critical labor news that is unfolding as we speak. And this time, it's happening in the world of college athletics. Now, listen, I know that people have really strong feelings about college sports, and I just want to state up top and for the record that I love sports. I love college sports, and I am a University of Michigan alum who will be cheering on my Wolverines in the college football championship next week. Go Blue. But none of that negates the fact that the college sports world is long overdue for a reckoning, especially as it pertains to the classification of college athletes as workers and university employees with the right to unionize. And that reckoning may be coming sooner than we think. As Amanda Kristovich recently wrote for Front Office Sports, quote, "The NCAA's business model of amateurism is on trial in a labor court in Los Angeles. The National Labor Relations Board's local office will begin hearing a case that could ultimately reclassify Division I football and basketball players as university employees under federal labor law. The NCAA's entire business model would then be deemed illegal, as athletes would be entitled to earn salaries, apply for a formal union, and receive access to all the benefits of employees under U.S. labor law, such as workers' compensation." The case was filed in February of 2022 by the National College Players Association against USC, UCLA, the Pac-12, and the NCAA. However, UCLA has since been dropped over a jurisdiction issue. End quote. To talk about all of this and more, I was honored to be joined on The Art of Class War by Cassidy Woods and Jason Stahl. Cassidy is a senior at Auburn University, and he serves on the leadership committee of the College Football Players Association, and he is a watchman for collegiate athletes. And Jason is the founder and executive director of the College Football Players Association. Here's my interview with Cassidy and Jason, which we recorded right here from the Real News Studio in Baltimore. Jason, Cassidy, thank you both so much for joining us today on Breaking Points. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Appreciate being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity.
Now, I have so much I want to ask you guys, but I know we got, only a little bit of time together. And I wanted to, before we kind of dig into the current NLRB case and the implications of it, I wanted to take a quick step back and just sort of frame this for people, remind folks about how we got here, right? I want to talk about that long fight to get to this point and each of y'all's involvement in the struggle to, counteract the NCAA behemoth and this amateur athlete model upon which the entire thing is based. And and about that fight to win recognition for college athletes as workers. So yeah, Cassie, why don't we start with you?
Man, I think when tackling on this question, I'm more so you got to look at the past in order to understand what we're dealing with in the present. And so when you think of the term student athlete, you got to understand that it was coined based off an athlete that passed away by the name of Ryan Dennison. He played at Fort Lewis A&M in Colorado in 1956, and his wife was asking for workers' compensation benefits because he died on kickoff return playing football, and NCAA came up with the term student athlete as a way to not pay for those benefits that his wife was asking. So when you look at the history of it and see how the NCAA is continuing to exploit athletes based off this term, you understand what have we've been dealing with since 1956 and it's 2023. And you can't deal with a model that's based off of 1956 and still continue to have the same thing that's perpetuating itself in 2023. And we're just sitting here just trying to, speak truth to a system that's been doing this and oppressing a group of people for so long. And in America, we don't do that anymore. So why are we continuing to allow the NCAA to do it? And so that's what's pretty much that we're how I would tackle this question on basically just speaking truth to what's happening to athletes that have passed away and died under the circumstances of this system and trying to make sure that it's not happening again.
And how did you yourself get kind of brought into that struggle, or like as an athlete and a worker, like, I guess, when for you did those two sides of what you do really kind of come together in this fight?
Man, it was definitely based on my story, just with everything that I've been through at Washington State, and just if it wasn't for the pain of that experience, I wouldn't have, got hipped into my purpose, and that's for being a spokesperson and, like you said, a watchman. I really feel like it's a divine calling from my heavenly Father to speak to a system and just bring truth to a system. And I'm thankful for the College Football Player Association, just being able to be blessed with Jason in my life, because it just really gave me the opportunity to be part of the solution, and be part of the grassroots of it all, to bring forth the NCAA change that I see fit in the system as such. So that's where I would feel like that's what I would say. With everything. Hopefully that makes sense.
That made sense. Yeah, Jason, what about you? Tell us a little bit about like that long fight to get to where we are now, and your involvement in that fight.
Yeah, I mean, I'll piggyback off what Cassidy said. I mean, Cassidy spoke to his experience at Washington State. And, for those who don't know, Cassidy and others like him in the Pac-12 football players were instrumental in organizing during that first COVID summer in 2020, right? They were being told, in many cases, a lot of players wanted to return to play. A lot of players didn't want to return to play because health and safety precautions were not in place for the pandemic. Cassidy and others were the ones who took the lead in organizing and essentially demanding that for those players who wanted to play, that those health and safety protections would be put into place. As part of that movement that he was a part of, there was this direct call for the creation of a College Football Players Association. At the time, I had been advocating for players at as a faculty member, players at a specific institution. And I said, yeah, this is exactly what's needed. And I was cheering these guys on effectively from the sidelines and not thinking that I was going to be the one to kind of try to take up the reins and organize players nationwide. But I think really, if we look at the sort of current incarnation of things and why it is that we are where we are with the NLRB hearing or where we are with organizing, it really has to do with that first COVID summer, where we really saw for athletic departments across this country saying, oh yeah, we need the football players to play. Everybody else stay home because, you need to be safe, but we need these football players on the field. Well, right there, what are we shown? We're shown that college football players are the essential workers of college athletics. And so I think that as we go then the 3.5 years since then, it's really born out of those organizing efforts. And that's really why we are where we are today, because I think the pandemic showed everyone just how essential players like Cassidy were.
Well, and I think that's really powerfully put by both of you. And it's something that I have heard from so many other types of workers over the past 3.5 years, right? About how much COVID showed, like what being quote unquote essential really means, right? It's not just like, a term that your boss gives you, right? It's you showing that like without you and your work, the rest of society would fall apart, right? And people should be compensated fairly for that work, right? People should be treated better, like knowing how vital they are to making our lives and society and economy run. And yet it feels like in so many ways, the ruling class, the bosses, chambers of commerce, what have you, the media, we're all collectively trying to unlearn the lessons that we learned from the
Mhm.
sacrifices that workers
Mhm.
made during those first years of COVID-19. But I think like this is like a good way to sort of dive back into the NLRB case itself, right? Because like in terms of the fight over, yeah, like student athletes and the whole exploitative economy of college sports, the billions of dollars that are generated from the what student athletes, quote unquote, do but are not compensated for, whether we're talking about apparel companies like Nike or television stations like ESPN. That discussion has been going on for a while, of course, and of course, this is not the first case, that is going to bring the question up of whether or not college athletes are in fact employees of the university. But it does feel like something in the sort of national understanding has changed, especially as far as we're talking about labor. And we're going to get to that in the final question. But I want to like zero in on the NLRB case itself and ask y'all if you could talk a little bit to our viewers about like what the essential points are of this case and why is it so important? And how is it different from past cases like the Northwestern case in
Mhm.
2014? So, like, what would the implications be if the judge rules in favor of the athletes in this case?
I'll go ahead and get us started here. So this particular case really does, it was the NLRB effectively took it up because there had been a lot of agitation out of the NLRB office before this to essentially say college athletes are not student athletes, they are employees. And so this case was brought before them, and they sort of are seizing on this as an opportunity to effectively make this case that I think they've been wanting to make for some time, which is particularly we're talking about high level Division I college athletes, because that's what the case focuses on, right? And focusing on USC and the conference and the NCAA, that basketball players, both male and female, and also football players are employees of a joint employer, right? Of the institution, the conference, the NCAA. And so what's really at issue here is a sort of legal definition, and that centers on control, right? There's this idea that the schools and the conferences effectively control the college athlete's schedule, what they can and cannot do in a way that corresponds to the legal definition of what it means to be an employee, right? And so if the NLRB is successful at the local level, it will then undoubtedly be appealed to the national level. And then after that, it might go into federal court. So we could have a kind of long battle here. I think the way this differs from Northwestern, which is 10 years ago now, is it is a sort of high level way to try to get through new rights for college athletes, right? It is a way to use these sort of elite levers to change things. What we're trying to do, the College Football Players Association, I think is more akin to what you saw in the Northwestern situation 10 years ago, which is we think the power resides in the athletes acting collectively. And we are creating a players association for college football players specifically to act collectively because, of course, if you look at American history, change can be made in multiple ways, and those elite levers are important. But we think what we're doing in terms of organizing the players is just as, if not more, important.
And just going off of what Jason said, I think what's critical for me is just like me looking at it as a lens just from being a collegiate athlete and all the different levels I played. I played in the Pac-12, now in the SEC, and now in the Big Sky. It's just like, yes, if we push for employment status, that will only be beneficial for Power Five or Group of Five athletes. It wouldn't be the same for people that's in the FCS, those in JUCO and things like that. It's like, yes, employmentship is good, but at the same time, creating money is more creating of the chaos when it comes to NIL. Because I believe that when NIL came out, it was at the expense of us coming out with the We Are United movement. That was the only reason why they came out with it, to appease collegiate athletes during that time. So we wouldn't continue to have a nationwide movement where athletes are being spokesperson for themselves and demanding rights and demanding revenue sharing, things like that. And that's when NCAA came out with NIL. But what people don't realize is when they did come in with NIL, there was no education behind it. It just gave athletes the opportunity to monetize off their name, image, and likeness, but didn't educate them on, oh, what would that look like when it comes with taxes and things like that. That wasn't until years after where they demanded athletes, oh, you got to have taxes. You got to make sure that you're getting educated on what to do with this NIL thing. So for me, it's more so if employment does happen, which that would be cool, but at the same time, there has to be education on what athletes should do when they do become employees. And that's what's so great about the CFBPA. We're not pushing solely for that. We want to organize athletes. Unity is more powerful than any amount of money that could come with it, in my opinion. And that's what we believe here at the CFBPA. But at the same time, I think it's critical that athletes be organized, no matter what, whether employment status or not. And that would give you athletes more, I say, rights to demand for whatever they want to push for when you are unified as a whole. And that's what I believe for sure.
Yeah, man. I mean, we watch, you guys all the time show what human beings can accomplish when they work together as a team, right? We see the incredible athletic feats, the feats of, strength and endurance and heart that we can accomplish through sports, like when you have a basketball team that's working in sync, that's fighting, like to win a championship, right? I mean, there's a lot that the rest of the workforce can learn from watching sports, right? About how you can maximize each person's skills and strengths, and like ways that you can sort of go on the offensive and not just be on the defensive all the time, right? So like thinking about that great lesson from team sports like basketball and football about what we can accomplish together when we're united, like you said, Cassie, and we're organized, and we work hard at winning. Like imagine if we brought that mentality, like elsewhere, to where workers are organizing and fighting for their rights. That could be really exciting. And I want to kind of end on that note. I want to sort of connect this to, the rest of the energy that we're seeing in the labor movement and in the workforce around the country. Over the past couple of years, as we've been covering here on Breaking Points, at the Real News Network, on my show, Working People, that worker militancy is growing. And in fact, public support for worker struggles, for unions, for the labor movement are at historic highs right now. But it does still feel like that national discussion about, where college athletes fit in that is still stuck in a sort of old, outdated way of thinking, right? You're going to get all the questions about like, well, what about people in D3, or, like, what about people who play sports that don't generate a lot of money? And, what about the education you're supposed to get? Isn't that compensation? Like, we're not going to get mired in all of that, right? I just want, for folks who are hearing about this case now, especially folks who are fans of sports, I want to, ask what you would say to them about the fight to classify college athletes as university employees, as workers, and how that fight is connected to the other labor struggles that we're seeing happening around the country.
I would say to fans, if you see that athletes are being classified as employees, that would mean that employment means that this game is professional. You're not an amateur at this point. And I think that's what's so beautiful about the CFBPA. It's like we know underlying that athletes are essential workers, but at the same time, it's just that we want to make sure that we prepare for a professional model. I mean, every professional NFL team has a player association, and that's what's more doable and what's more and more sustainable, is a PA versus employmentship. And I mean, I've talked to a lot of athletes, and I feel like that's what's more beneficial than any employment status. But at the same time, it's like if it does happen, that's great. But I think continue to organize what we're doing in CFPPA is definitely what will, put things in the right perspective when it does come to employmentship, and athletes still being able to collectively come together, whether being employees or not.
Speaking of fans, I mean, again, we're organizing college football players, right? And so I would want to speak directly to college football fans, because there's been a lot of angst over the past 2 years, 2.5 years, among fans that the game is sort of breaking down. The game's very chaotic. The transfer portal means you don't know the players. Guys are hopping from one school to the next and so on. And I think we're sympathetic to that fan perspective. I know Cassidy is. I know other members of our leadership committee are. I certainly am. I think that what we're trying to do here, if college football players get classified as employees, or if we unionize college football players, I think this benefits the fans enormously, because we're going to create a more sustainable environment for everyone involved, for coaches, for players, for fans, for everyone, where it's professionalized instead of the sort of quasi middle zone between amateur status and professional status that we're in right now. I think fans should absolutely embrace what we're doing, and they should embrace what we're doing. And this is where we think if employment status goes forward and high-level college football players get deemed employees from this particular case, that's fine. But, employee status without unionization is something we should not necessarily cheer for, because I think a lot of the powers that be will find new ways to exploit that. And so what we're trying to do is to say you need unionization with employment status, right? And in that case, you can get a collective bargaining agreement that creates a more sustainable game that fans can enjoy more, and also brings us the health and safety protections that college football players desperately need. Much of our platform speaks directly to that. And we think fans should embrace that, because we think this game right now really needs to be made safer than it is right now. The practice level, especially, people don't know this. 33 college football players have died playing the game in the 21st century. Most of that has occurred during the practice setting, And so we think fans should embrace this, because they can be prouder watching the game, because it's a more sustainable game that is safer for the players. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do in organizing players nationwide.
Not only is it a win for the players, it's a win for the coaches too, because it makes things more fair. All coaches can essentially have a fair shot to win. Right now, it's all about who has the most money, who has the most bag to get a player. With a collective bargaining agreement and having unionization among players, it allows, I feel like there could be salary caps, there could be tampering punishments that could happen as well. So there's so many things that could make the game not only beneficial for the players and the fans, but also the coaches too. And that's what's been been missing within the NCAA. There's been this created power gap between the players and the coaches. And that's what's so beautiful about the CFBPA. It's like we're giving power and opportunity and a voice to players, but also bridging that gap so players and coaches can work together. And I feel like that's the solution to what we need for now.
Hell yeah, baby. I couldn't have said it better myself. And I think that's really powerfully put, right? Because that's the whole spirit and message of the organized labor movement, and that y'all are really preaching there, is that even if we don't get, that employee status, like having our labor still makes this whole thing run. And if we had more of a collective say in how things were run, it would ultimately be better for everybody. Like, that's the same message that any unionized workforce, pitches to their employers, their customer base, and society writ large. So I think it's beautiful that y'all are taking that message up and fighting the good fight over there. But I know I got to let you go. So Cassidy, Jason, thank you both so much for joining us today on Breaking Points. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you for watching this segment with Breaking Points, and be sure to subscribe to my news outlet, The Real News Network, with links in the description of this video. See you soon for the next edition of The Art of Class War. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Solidarity forever.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.